Yes, today we are covering the cancelled Treasure Planet sequel, Treasure Planet 2, the fan favorite of sequel projects that will absolutely never happen. Or will it? So yes, this is a cancelled project I've seen murmured around on the internet for ages now, as they were legitimately developing a sequel to the movie before even the first one had actually come out. A very daring and ambitious project, to say the least. It had the bare bones of a story all worked out, a reunion of Jim and John Silver, and a villain that would have been voiced by the Green Goblin himself, Willem Dafoe. However, even before the first movie's complete car crash at the box office, however tragic that may be, the movie's dubious status as most expensive traditionally animated movie of all time, combined with Disney's escalating steps towards CG animated movies, had basically signed the sequel's death warrant immediately. Even the studio's excessive habit of straight-to-video sequels couldn't really save this one. Though again, that's another suggestion I do get a lot, so let me know if you'd like me to cover those. Treasure Planet represented a failure that led to a turning point in the company that would change its animation output forever. When weighed up against its budget, it is often considered one of the most expensive box office failures of all time. With that much baggage going against it on such a fundamental level, it is no surprise that this corporation-rattling flop just never got its sequel. However, what would the sequel have been? What was the road to all of this mess, and has the movie's newfound cult classic status revitalized hopes for a follow-up of some form? Well, come join me as we go through just that very timeline. And perhaps we'll show some of the rare footage and images we have to prove that this project even existed in the first place. The story begins with a movie that actually saved Disney from its biggest flop of all. Treasure Planet may have failed, but it didn't almost destroy the studio like The Black Cauldron did. Good lord, they had a rough day at the office with this one. Black Cauldron was in production during another point of major Disney reshuffle, which brought in Michael Eisner, Frank Wells, and of course, art series regular Jeffrey Katzenberg. The movie's production was in so much turmoil that Katzenberg threw the hammer down on a brutalized cut of the film, removing a lot of the darker sequences. Unsurprisingly, the results may have been lighter, but they certainly hadn't made the movie better. Released in 1985, the movie very much cemented itself as the literal dark horse of the Disney repertoire. Though I'd say it still holds a great deal more artistic merit than, say, Ralph Breaks the Internet, you know? The production was such a mess that many of the creative team moved to the other movie in development, that being The Great Mouse Detective, released in 1986. Now, while it made nowhere near the splash that The Little Mermaid, no pun intended, made, it managed to be a decently performing film that turned the post-Black Cauldron narrative around and get the studio on the road to recovery. But you may be asking, why is that exactly relevant to Treasure Planet? Well, that's because it was directed by Ron Clements and John Musker, the guys who would use their newfound studio savior status to embark on a 20-year battle to get Treasure Planet to the big screen. Yes, this duo would be the ones behind some of the great Disney movies going forwards from this point. Little Mermaid, Aladdin, Hercules, these two were the real deal. And with each success they had, they would take another swing at pitching their Treasure Island in Space movie to the studio. Literally right from the pre-Great Mouse Detective era, the first pitch of this was in 1985. So I guess you could argue that the production for this movie took 17 years. From 1985 to 2002. And throughout this journey, they would continually try and get it made each time they delivered another hit. And after Aladdin blew the roof off, they were particularly sure that they could get this damn thing made. And yet old Jeffrey Katzenberg just wasn't interested. Nonetheless, this time the two weren't having it. They went straight to Roy Disney, no less. Passing this on to Michael Eisner, it would soon be put into contract that they would be able to make the movie once they'd finished Hercules. And that's exactly what they did. One Hercules later, and they were ready to get cracking on the movie. However, between the contract being signed in 1995 and the movie going into production in 2000, one major thing had happened. Pixar's Toy Story. The movie that set the stage for the industry to change forever came out soon after that contract was signed. And though Disney continued to plow on with their traditional releases, it was beginning to become clear what the new gold rush was about to be. However, in many ways, this appeared to be in Treasure Planet's favor. Whilst not a bona fide CG movie, Musker and Clements were still looking to use a lot of it for the space sequences and creatures. To this day, the blending of the traditionally animated John Silver and his CG arm is commendable. However, with Disney in between the underwhelming performances of its own recent efforts and its taste of Pixar's immense levels of success, this would later come to curse the movie. Already, Emperor's New Groove and Atlantis had performed underwhelmingly by the studio's own standards, and the CG as the future narrative had already begun. It didn't matter that their first computer-animated effort, Dinosaur, had bombed, whilst Lilo and Stitch was a massive hit. That's the narrative that corporate were running with. Not to mention their complete humiliation in the face of Shrek's juggernaut success with its taste of now rival Katzenberg's desire to poke fun at Disney on full display. Whilst they'd had some warning shots from prior DreamWorks efforts, Shrek lit his green beacon that other studios could make money in the animation industry. It really was the signal that not only has Disney just lost its monopoly in the animated movie market, but that they were well behind of DreamWorks and, by proxy, their own collaborators like Pixar. And eventually they'd get there with Chicken Little, so, really a tumultuous time for Disney. But before then, they had to deal with these damn traditionally animated movies already in production. Thank you for making it halfway through this video. This is the part where I tell you to subscribe if you're interested in future cancelled videos. There are all sorts of other cancelled sequels and spin-offs based out of already existing franchises, so I think I'm going to go through them over the next few months. Let us know if any cancelled projects call out to you. But otherwise, I shall let you get back to the rest of the story of Treasure Planet and its cancelled sequel. Thanks for watching halfway through. But before then, they had to deal with these damn traditionally animated movies already in production. In hindsight, it did feel like the bigwigs were looking to bury this movie as a sacrificial lamb to get 2D animation out of the picture. I mean, they released it with Harry Potter the Chamber of Secrets, a James Bond movie, and Disney's own The Santa Claus 2. They put it up against their own movie. And yet, despite this apparent financial assassination attempt, they did have plans for the standard direct-to-video sequel and TV cartoon treatment for the movie. Which of course brings us to the cancelled sequel. Now, this was a model that had been kicked off with Aladdin and had only grown in success for Disney with The Lion King and later Lilo and Stitch. Hell, with the Lilo and Stitch spin-off content, they basically created their own version of Pokemon. So, despite this whole video giving the impression that the studio has hated this movie since that first pitch in 1985, they preemptively planned spin-off media for its potential success. They had already begun full-on developing this sequel. They had a story, a new main villain in Ironbeard, it was all ready to go. Better still, none other than Willem Dafoe was apparently going to voice this Ironbeard character, who I'm guessing would literally just be a cyborg version of Blackbeard. That's very much this property's MO, turning famous pirates into robots. If this franchise had taken off, we'd definitely be seeing a Jack Sparrow riff in the third one. Definitely a TV episode at least. Anyway, the story would have been Ironbeard becoming a big bad in the galaxy, causing a scenario that would be the reunion of Jim and John Silver, of course. Jim, by the way, would be happily attending the Royal Interstellar Academy, where I'm guessing it's just classes of how to cry, like the Matthew McConaughey meme. He would then be heading into this adventure with his new classmate and new love interest, Kate. Because, they really thought through the character when she's just called his love interest in the premise. Jim, John Silver, and Kate would have assembled to stop Ironbeard before he releases all the inmates of Botany Bay Prison Asteroid. Yep, you had to add an asteroid on the end to make it all the more out of spacey. This would have been interesting, though I do also think that it would have been very much remembered as a passable Disney DVD, as opposed to anything more profound. The idea of a sequel to Treasure Planet has loomed on the internet for a while, and I'm sure there are all sorts of grandiose imaginations that fans have thought onto it, but this does seem to be a premise for just a very simple DVD sequel, you know what I mean? And let's be honest, the reason why this sequel is so sought after is purely because it didn't happen. But evidently, they weren't thinking that whilst they were still making the movie, and by proxy, developing its sequel at the same time. To be fair, the production team may have had a good reason to legitimately think that this movie was going to take off. They did give it a solid marketing push after all. I mean, they launched the first trailer to play alongside Star Wars Attack of the Clones, which surely should have gotten its part of the audience. And Hasbro made toys, for God's sake. Even now, I still remember the McDonald's Happy Meals campaign where you could collect different bits of Ben the Robot. Kinda gross, I guess, that they were beckoning kids to have like 9 Happy Meal toys to make this robot, but hey, that's its own marketing problem from the McDonald's side of things. Also, can't complain too much on this one, as McDonald's gave my very first acting job at a very young age. I don't know how well known that is nowadays, but yeah, that's me in a McDonald's advert. I was a very active 6-year-old kid in London. Anyway, as we'd go on to learn, even the very capable hands of the McDonald's marketing team just couldn't have saved this movie. Considering its $140 million price tag, its total of $110 million gross was just crushing. The movie tanked, and Disney traditional animation department was retired one home on the range later. It still boggles me that these two eras of Disney are conjoined by two farm-centric movies, with Chicken Little coming out after that. However, as the internet very much made sure of, life for Treasure Planet would not end there. On home media, and though I hate giving it credit very much, on Disney Plus as well, this thing is now a certified cult classic. Almost 22 years on, this movie is now the darling of animation YouTube. Despite its flaws, it's pretty universally recognized as a great movie that just didn't get its due. Its more radical reinvention of a classic tale paved the way for later efforts such as Rapunzel and the Snow Queen before Tangled and Frozen. Its fascinating blend of period clothing and steampunk in a sci-fi setting remains unique even to this day. And the core relationship between Jim and John Silver is now often commended for improving on the original source material. As for whether Disney has noticed the fact, I think they have some idea, as just last year in the 100-year anniversary short, Jim Hawkins got a nice individual shot gliding down the corridors of Disney animation. Beyond that, they were certainly not shy on the merchandise for the movie's 20th year anniversary either, as they gave Jim and John Silver their own Christmas ornament for God's sake. Whilst I don't think they'd risk another theatrical movie, I could definitely see more recent successes along the lines of X-Men 97 spurring on finally getting a series done or something. Do it properly, and you could get a really good series out of the Treasure Planet universe for Disney+. It would also make for one of the better live-action remake ideas, though I have no interest in spurring them on to do more of those. Though I guess we'll see if the outcome of that photorealistic Mufasa will really change my mind. That's what I think at the very least. That is the full timeline of the Treasure Planet franchise, and the unfortunate cancelling before it could even really begin that is the cancelled Treasure Planet sequel. But I'd love to hear, what are your thoughts on this? Do you think that that premise for the sequel would have actually been good, or do you think it's more overhyping over just our imaginative minds? Or better still, do you think there's a future in Treasure Planet yet? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the YouTube comments or over on our Discord server. As for now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the very end of this video, and I shall see you in a little bit.